I didn't know my life was about to split into a before and an after on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. If someone had asked me then, I would have said my biggest concern was getting my daughter ice cream after school. After she finished her math homework, of course. I was 39 years old, a former military intelligence officer turned cybersecurity company founder, a mother who believed she had finally built a stable, protected life. My husband, James, was away on a business trip in San Francisco, his first major conference since a recent promotion, and our 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, was the center of everything I did. I rearranged my schedule, coordinated with my business partner, promised myself I would be fully present. That Tuesday felt normal, too normal. At 2:40 p.m., I was sitting in my car in the elementary school parking lot, replying to emails while waiting for dismissal. When my phone rang and I saw the school's number, my chest tightened instantly. Schools don't call parents during class hours unless something is wrong. Sophie is fine, her teacher said quickly, but her voice carried tension she couldn't hide. However, we need to talk about the woman who's been picking her up. The world tilted. What woman? I asked. I'm the only one who picks her up. Her father is in California. Silence. Then, can you come inside immediately? Minutes later, I was sitting across from the principal as sign-out sheets were slid toward me. My name, my husband's name, written in familiar handwriting. Every day. Since Monday. Someone had signed Sophie out at 2:00 p.m., taken her away for 45 minutes, and brought her back before dismissal. Someone who knew her birthday, her classroom, her teacher's name, someone Sophie trusted enough to walk away with, holding her hand. Security footage confirmed it. A woman, similar height and build to my husband, moving with confidence, avoiding cameras without making it obvious. Planned. Precise. When Sophie finally looked up at me and said, "She looked like Daddy, smelled like his cologne. She said she was Aunt Rachel," my blood turned to ice. Rachel. My husband's estranged older sister. The one with a restraining order. The one we hadn't seen in 6 years. That was the moment I understood something terrifying. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't confusion. This was the beginning of a nightmare, and I was the only one standing between my daughter and someone who believed she was entitled to take her. Before everything broke open, I believed my life made sense. I was 39, disciplined to the bone after 12 years in military intelligence. I had learned to read patterns, anticipate threats, and stay calm when chaos tried to swallow the room. When I left the service, I built a cybersecurity company from the ground up. Long hours, constant vigilance, but full control over my future. Control mattered to me. It always had. James and I met 8 years earlier through mutual friends at a charity tech event. He was sharp, ambitious, already climbing fast in marketing. He had an easy smile that softened the edges of his intensity. Where I was guarded, he was open. Where I planned, he trusted. We balanced each other in a way that felt rare and steady. Falling in love with him didn't feel dramatic. It felt safe. We married 3 years later, and when Sophie was born, my entire world reorganized itself around her. I had faced hostile environments overseas, but nothing compared to the responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. Sophie became my anchor. Bright, curious, endlessly trusting. The kind of child who believed adults meant what they said. James adored her. He was the kind of father who practiced silly voices before bedtime stories, who never missed a recital, who kept photos of Sophie on every device he owned. When he earned his promotion to marketing VP, it felt like a shared victory. We celebrated quietly at home, Sophie perched between us at the table, kicking her feet while we talked about San Francisco and how strange it would feel to be apart for a week. Rachel came up briefly that night. James's older sister, 3 years older, a name that always shifted the air between us. I'd met her only once, at our engagement party. She arrived late, drunk, eyes glassy with something that wasn't just alcohol. She hugged James too tightly, ignored me completely, then spiraled into a rant about how he had stolen everything. When she threw a glass that shattered inches from my face, James physically removed her from the house. She screamed threats as she was dragged out, about making us regret this, about how nothing good ever stayed with him. We filed a restraining order the next morning. After that, Rachel became a shadow, letters that arrived unannounced, rambling messages filled with blame and self-pity. James explained their childhood to me slowly over time. Their mother died of cancer when Rachel was 15, James only 12. Their father remarried quickly to a woman who wanted no part of grieving children. James coped by excelling: school, scholarships, ambition. Rachel unraveled: pills, bad relationships, arrests, resentment that hardened as James succeeded. By the time Sophie was born, Rachel had vanished from our lives entirely. The letters stopped. The restraining order expired 2 years earlier, and in our exhaustion and relief, we let it lapse. We thought silence meant peace. I never pushed James to talk about her more. I believed in respecting old wounds. I believed that if someone stayed gone long enough, they'd chosen to move on. Looking back, I see the signs I dismissed. The way James tensed whenever unknown numbers called. How he avoided talking about his childhood beyond surface details. How carefully we structured Sophie's routines, our privacy, our schedules, without ever admitting why. I thought I was being cautious. I didn't realize someone else had been watching us for years, studying us, planning, waiting for the moment when James would be out of town and Sophie would be just vulnerable enough. By the time I sat in that principal's office, staring at forged signatures and grainy footage, I understood something with brutal clarity. Rachel hadn't disappeared. She had been preparing. And my family, the life I thought was secure, had been a target long before I ever noticed the crosshairs. That afternoon after the meeting at school, I drove home with Sophie in the back seat, her small shoes tapping softly against the car door as she hummed, completely unaware that the adults in her life were suddenly holding their breath. I kept my voice steady anyway. "Sweetheart," I said, adjusting the rearview mirror so I could see her eyes. "When the lady picked you up, did she ever scare you?" Sophie blinked, confused by my seriousness. "No, she was nice. She said you told her it was okay." My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "What exactly did she say?" Sophie tilted her head like she was trying to remember the lines of a story. "She said, 'It's a surprise. Mommy and Daddy said I can take you for a little bit.' And then she bought me a cookie one day, and she always held my hand." I swallowed hard, feeling my throat go tight. 7-year-olds didn't question adults who sounded confident and knew the right details. They especially didn't question adults who looked familiar. "What did she look like?" Sophie smiled faintly. "Like Daddy." My skin prickled. "Like Daddy how?" "She had Daddy's smile," Sophie said, as if that explained everything. "And her hair was like Daddy's hair, but different. And she wore sunglasses and a hat, and she smelled like Daddy's cologne." A cold, sick understanding slid into place. This wasn't just someone showing up with a fake ID. Whoever she was actively building trust, using familiarity like a weapon. "And she said her name was Aunt Rachel?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle, even though my pulse was hammering. Sophie nodded. "She said she's Daddy's sister. She said Daddy missed her." My stomach dropped so hard it felt like gravity doubled. When we got home, I tucked Sophie into her favorite spot on the couch with cartoons and a snack, and I walked into the kitchen as if my legs weren't shaking. I called James immediately. He answered on the second ring, already distracted by conference noise. "Hey, everything okay?" "No," I said quietly. "James, listen to me. Someone has been picking Sophie up from school every day at 2 o'clock. Silence. Then his voice sharpened. "What do you mean, someone?" "They've been signing her out and returning her. The school thought it was you. They have your name on the sheets. She told Sophie she's Aunt Rachel." There was a long pause, too long. "That's not possible," James finally said, but the denial sounded thin, like a sheet over something rotten. "Rachel doesn't know where we live. She can't." "She can," I said, and she did. James's breathing turned shallow on the line. "I'm flying home." "No," I said fast, too fast. Then I forced myself to slow down. "No, that's exactly what she wants. If she's watching, she'll see you panic. She'll escalate." "You're telling me to stay here?" he hissed. I could hear the fear in the anger. "Our daughter." "Our daughter is with me," I said, voice low. "I'm locking this down. You finish the conference. You keep your location predictable. If Rachel is trying to draw you back, we don't give her that control." The words felt harsh, but I meant them. I had spent years learning that an enemy's favorite thing wasn't violence. It was your reaction. James exhaled shakily. Okay, what do you need?" "I need you to tell me everything about Rachel," I said. "Everything. No minimizing. No, she's just unstable. I need the facts." He went quiet again, then said, "She's been in and out of psychiatric facilities. stalking charges, breaking and entering. When we got engaged, she threatened us. We got a restraining order. And we let it expire, I said, bitterness slipping through despite myself. Yes, James admitted, voice thick. We let it lapse. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingertips to my forehead. There were two kinds of fear, the kind that made you panic, and the kind that made you intensely, painfully clear. I was in the second kind. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, I pulled out my laptop and began compiling everything, like I was back in intelligence, building a file on a target. Rachel's history, her arrests, her old addresses, patterns. And one thought kept repeating like a warning siren in my head. If she has been taking Sophie every afternoon for a week, then this isn't random. It's rehearsed. It's a routine. And routines mean she's building up to something. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake beside Sophie's door, the hallway light left on deliberately, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Every creak of the house sounded louder. Every shadow felt wrong. My mind replayed the school footage again and again, the way Rachel moved with confidence, the way she knew exactly where to sign, when to leave, how to avoid cameras without looking suspicious. That wasn't impulse. That was practice. By dawn, I had already made a decision. I drove Sophie to school myself, walked her all the way to her classroom, and knelt so we were eye level. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Sweetheart, I said quietly, if anyone tries to pick you up today, anyone at all, what do you do? She frowned, sensing the seriousness. Even if they say they know Daddy? Especially then, I said. You scream. You run to your teacher. You don't go anywhere unless it's me. Or Uncle Marcus. She nodded solemnly, like a soldier receiving orders. I met with the principal again immediately after. New rules went into effect that morning. No early pickups, no exceptions, photo ID verification every single time, and 2 off-duty police officers hired as visible security for the rest of the week. Then I started hunting. Rachel's last known address was in Milwaukee, 3 hours away. I called the landlord under the pretense of being a potential employer. Rachel had moved out 4 months earlier, no forwarding address. 4 months. The timing was too precise to ignore. I dug deeper, old habits resurfacing with ease, credit card records, vehicle registrations, patterns of cash withdrawals. By mid-afternoon, a location surfaced like a bruise under skin. A Walgreens on Miller Street. ATM withdrawals every 3 days, always at 6:45 p.m., same machine, same pattern. She wasn't passing through. She was local. That evening, I asked Marcus to stay with Sophie. He didn't argue, just nodded once, eyes sharp with concern. Text me every 10 minutes. At 6:30 p.m., I parked across from the Walgreens. At 6:43, a beat-up Honda pulled into the lot. My pulse spiked. Rachel stepped out. She was thinner than I remembered from photos. Her hair was darker, shorter, but the way she moved, the nervous pacing, the way her shoulders tensed before she looked around, was unmistakable. She withdrew cash and returned to her car. I followed at a distance, careful, controlled. She drove to a cheap roadside motel, the Riverside Inn, and parked in front of room 117. And then I saw something that stopped my heart. A child appeared in the window. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, watching cartoons. Rachel wasn't alone. The next morning, I returned with a telephoto lens and parked across the street. The child appeared again, eating cereal, swinging her legs off the bed. Rachel paced the room, checked her phone repeatedly, then left alone at 9:15 a.m. I waited 10 minutes. Then I approached the room and knocked. Maintenance, I called lightly. Just checking the air conditioning. The door opened only as far as the chain allowed. The girl peered out, cautious but curious. My mom's not here. That's okay, I said calmly. You can watch me fix it from there. While I pretended to inspect the unit, my eyes scanned the room. 2 beds, fast food wrappers, and on the dresser, photos. Dozens of them. Sophie at the playground. Sophie walking into school. Sophie holding my hand. Some were recent. Some were older. My stomach twisted. That little girl, I said casually, nodding toward the photos. She's important to your mom, huh? The girl smiled. Yeah, Mommy says she's going to be my sister. My breath caught. She says we're going to be a family, the girl continued proudly. She likes her a lot. I forced myself to nod, to smile, to leave without making a sound. The moment I was back in my car, I locked the doors and sat there shaking. This wasn't stalking. This wasn't obsession. This was delusion. Rachel hadn't just been borrowing Sophie. She had been rehearsing a fantasy where Sophie already belonged to her. I called Detective Shaw immediately and told him everything. And as my phone buzzed with an unknown number moments later, my blood went cold when I read the message. "She's beautiful. You've done such a good job raising her, but she needs a real mother's love. I can give her that." The next text came seconds later. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, understanding with sick clarity. This was no longer about surveillance. It was about confrontation. For a long moment after reading that message, I couldn't move. My phone felt heavy in my hand, like it carried more weight than glass and metal ever should. I read the words again and again, hoping they would rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. "She needs a real mother's love." My chest tightened, not with anger first, but with something colder. Violation. This woman wasn't just watching my daughter. She was rewriting reality in her own head, assigning herself a role she had no right to claim. I didn't respond immediately. Years of training told me silence could be louder than panic. I needed to think, to breathe, to remember that Sophie was safe right now. I called the school first, alerting them quietly. No early pickups, no exceptions. Marcus would be stationed in the parking lot the next day. The principal didn't argue. She could hear the urgencies in my voice. Then I called James. He answered instantly. "I'm packing." "No," I said again, softer this time. "Listen to me." I told him about the motel, the child, the photos. He went silent, and when he spoke again, his voice sounded hollow. "She has a daughter?" "Yes," I said, and in her mind, Sophie is already part of her family. I could hear his breathing change, short, uneven. "This is my fault," he said. "I should have dealt with her years ago." I felt the instinct to agree flare up, sharp and cruel. Instead, I forced myself to slow down. "No," I said firmly. "This is not about blame. This is about containment." After we hung up, I sat alone in the kitchen, lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The house felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin. That's when the doubt crept in. Had I missed something? I replayed the last few years in my head. Every casual dismissal, every moment I chose peace over questions. Had my confidence become complacency? Had my need for control blinded me to emotional threats I couldn't quantify? I thought about Sophie's trust, how easily she had believed the lie because it came wrapped in familiarity. That thought hurt more than anything else. My phone buzzed again. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone." Then the threat. "No police, or you'll never see Sophie again." My hands went cold. I forwarded everything to Detective Shaw immediately. His response was fast, but frustrating. Rachel hadn't technically committed a crime yet. Threats that vague lived in legal gray zones. "I'll send patrols near the school," he said. "But be careful, she's escalating." I knew that already. Friday morning, I drove Sophie to school myself. Marcus was already there, pretending to scroll on his phone, eyes constantly moving. I crouched in front of Sophie before she went inside. "If anyone says they're here for you," I whispered, "you run. You don't stop. You scream." She nodded, gripping her backpack straps. "Like a fire drill?" "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "Exactly like that." At 1:30 p.m., I arrived at Riverside Park early. It was sprawling, playground, walking trails, a small pond, too many hiding places. I walked the perimeter slowly, noting exits, blind spots, benches with clear sightlines. My phone recorded audio from inside my jacket. Detective Shaw was on speed dial. At 1:55, I saw her. Rachel walked toward me slowly, scanning the park like she was afraid of being seen, and hoping she was being watched at the same time. When her eyes landed on me, her face softened into something disturbingly hopeful. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting too close. I shifted away. "Why are you doing this?" I asked flatly. She smiled sadly. "I'm fixing things, making things fair." I felt my jaw tighten. "By manipulating a 7-year-old? "She likes me," Rachel insisted. "She laughs with me. We connect." "You lied to her," I said. "You impersonated my husband. You scared her parents." Rachel's expression flickered, anger bleeding through the mask. "Sarah never deserved her," she snapped. "Always choosing work, always choosing herself." "That's called having a job," I said coldly. Rachel leaned forward, voice lowering. "You don't understand. I lost everything. She got everything." I met her eyes steady. "Sophie is not your solution." Her voice broke. "I just want to matter." The words almost worked, almost made me forget the threat, the stalking, the photos. Almost. If you come near my daughter again, I said quietly, I will use every legal and personal resource I have to make sure you never see her. Ever. Rachel's smile vanished. Accidents happen, she whispered. Something in me hardened completely. If anything happens to Sophie, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm, I will hold you responsible, and I promise you, this ends badly for you. For the first time, Rachel looked afraid. As she backed away, she hissed, You think Sarah's perfect. You don't know what she's hiding. I didn't react, not outwardly. But as I watched her disappear into the trees, one thought echoed louder than the rest. Rachel wasn't finished. And whatever she thought she knew about my husband, it was about to become the next battlefield. I left Riverside Park with my spine locked straight and my emotions sealed tight, because the moment I let myself feel, I knew I'd unravel. In the car, I replayed the confrontation over and over. Rachel's posture, the way her eyes shifted when I mentioned Sophie's fear, the threat disguised as inevitability. Accidents happen. She wasn't bluffing for attention. She was testing boundaries, measuring how far she could push before I broke. I didn't break, but something else did. When I got home, my phone rang again. James. Everything okay at school? I asked before he could speak. Yes, he said. Marcus texted. All quiet. A pause. But you sound different. I met her, I said. Rachel. Another pause, then. What did she say? I told him everything. Carefully. Precisely. The way I always did when facts mattered. When I finished, he was silent long enough that I checked the call hadn't dropped. She said I have secrets, he finally said, voice tight. Didn't she? Yes, I said. And James, your reaction right now matters. I don't know what she's talking about, he said too quickly. She's always made things up, always tried to poison people against me. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him, at least enough to say, Okay, finish your presentation. We'll talk when you get home. But the seed Rachel planted didn't stay buried. That night, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, staring at James's past the way I never had before. Not because I wanted to doubt him, but because my daughter's safety demanded certainty. I started with the basics. James had told me he graduated from Northwestern with a marketing degree, alumni database. James Anderson, attendance confirmed. Degree status, withdrawn junior year. My stomach sank. I dug deeper. Student newspaper archives mentioned a quiet scandal involving a professor and multiple students. One complaint stood out. Filed, settled, then withdrawn. James Anderson. I leaned back in my chair, pulse thudding in my ears. This didn't automatically mean guilt. Universities bury scandals all the time, but it did mean omission. After Northwestern, James told me he spent 2 years in Los Angeles working for a startup. I searched business records. No employment history. No trace. I stared at the screen, the house too quiet around me. Sophie slept upstairs, blissfully unaware. And suddenly, the life I thought I understood felt thin, like paper held up to a harsh light. The next morning, I called a private investigator I'd worked with years ago, Marcus Green. Professional, discreet. I need everything on James Anderson, I said. 2010 to 2012, Los Angeles. He didn't ask questions, just said, I'll call you. By noon, Detective Shaw checked in. Patrols reported no Rachel sightings near the school, but another problem surfaced. Your stepmother-in-law tried to pick Sophie up this morning, Shaw said carefully. Claimed she was her aunt. My blood ran cold. She was stopped, he added quickly. Security protocol worked. Patricia Lockwood. James's stepmother. When James called later, I told him. His reaction was immediate and unfiltered. She knew. About Northwestern. About the settlement. Settlement? I repeated. He froze. The silence stretched, heavy, unmistakable. I should have told you, he said finally, voice cracking. I didn't think it mattered anymore. That night, James flew home. He arrived just before midnight, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped like he'd been carrying this weight for years. We stood in the living room, facing each other like strangers who shared a house. I know about Northwestern, I said. About the professor. About Los Angeles. His face went white. He reached for the couch as if the floor had tilted. How? He whispered. Rachel knows, I said. And now Patricia does too. They're using it to get to Sophie. James sank down, hands shaking. Tears spilled freely, messy, unguarded. He told me everything. How the professor relationship began as flattery, turned controlling. How reporting it felt like survival and shame tangled together. how the settlement money burned in his hands, how he went to LA lost and angry and made choices he was terrified would define him forever, how he rebuilt himself piece by piece afterward, earned his degree elsewhere, built a real career, became the man I married. I didn't lie, he said desperately. I omitted. That's the same thing, I said, quietly but firmly. I was scared, he admitted. Scared you'd see me differently. I looked at him, really looked, at the man who had been a devoted husband, a loving father, my partner in everything that mattered. You didn't lose me, I said, but you almost lost my trust. A text buzzed on my phone. From Rachel. TikTok. Truth comes out tomorrow. Hope you're ready for everyone to know who James really is. James's breath hitched. She's going to destroy us, he whispered. No, I said, something solid settling into place inside me. She thinks she is. I met his eyes. But we're done hiding. That night felt endless. James sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might open and swallow him whole. I stood by the window, watching the quiet street outside, every passing headlight making my muscles tense. We were both awake, but alone inside our own fear. Rachel's message pulsed in my mind. Truth comes out tomorrow. The worst part wasn't the threat itself. It was the waiting. The helplessness of knowing someone else believed they controlled the narrative of your life. Sophie slept upstairs. Her door cracked open the way she liked. I checked on her twice an hour, smoothing her hair, listening to her breathing. Each time, the same thought stabbed through me. She has no idea how close the world came to changing forever. James finally spoke, voice hoarse. If she posts it, if my company sees it, I could lose everything. I turned to him slowly. That's what you're worried about? He flinched, not because I was loud, but because I wasn't. I'm worried about Sophie, he said quickly. About you, about us. But you're also worried about your reputation, I said. And I understand that. I do. But that's how she wins, by making us prioritize image over safety. He pressed his palms into his eyes. I thought burying it would protect us. And instead, I said softly, it gave her leverage. Silence stretched between us, thick with regret. This was the lowest point. Not the confrontation at the park, not the threats, not even discovering the lies. It was this, realizing that the foundation of our marriage had cracks we never acknowledged, and that someone unstable was now prying at them with intent. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message from Rachel, short, cruel. You think you're in control, you're not. I felt something inside me finally snap, not into rage, but into clarity. I can't do this, James whispered. I can't watch her tear apart everything I built. I walked over and knelt in front of him, forcing him to look at me. Then stop letting her define you. He laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say. No, I said, it isn't. But I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. I'm afraid of secrets. His eyes filled again. What if Sophie finds out someday? She will, I said honestly. About parts of our past, about mistakes, about pain. And when she does, I want her to see two parents who chose honesty over fear. James shook his head slowly. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said, but intentions don't erase consequences. We sat there like that for a long time, holding hands without speaking, the weight of everything pressing down. For the first time since this began, I felt truly exhausted, not physically, but emotionally stripped bare. By morning, we looked like survivors of a storm. I poured coffee we barely drank. James watched the front door like he expected it to explode inward. Sophie came down in her pajamas, cheerful and oblivious, asking if she could have pancakes. I made them anyway. Normalcy became our armor. But inside, I felt hollow. Rachel's power didn't come from what she knew. It came from what we were afraid to admit. And standing there, watching Sophie laugh at spilled syrup, I realized something terrifying and grounding all at once. If this went wrong, we wouldn't just lose careers or reputations. We could lose each other. That was the true edge of the cliff. The moment where love, trust, and fear all collided, and I had to choose which one would decide what happened next. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would not let Rachel decide the ending of our story. By Saturday morning, the fear had burned itself out. What remained was something colder and far more useful. Resolve. I stood at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, rereading Rachel's last message. Truth comes out tomorrow. She believed exposure was power. That shame would silence us. That fear would keep us reactive, defensive, scrambling. She was wrong. Tell me what you're thinking, James said quietly from the doorway. He looked different now, still tired, but steadier, like a man who had finally accepted that running from the past only made it faster. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that Rachel doesn't want money. She wants control, and the only way to take that from her is to remove the secret. James swallowed. You mean tell them everything? I mean, I said, meeting his eyes, we stop protecting the lie and start protecting Sophie. No more half-truths. No more fear-based decisions. He nodded once. Okay, I'm in. That was the moment we became a team again. Not because things were fixed, but because we chose the same direction. I called Detective Shaw and laid everything out. Northwestern, the settlement, Los Angeles, Rachel's threats, Patricia's attempted pickup, the blackmail message. There was a pause on the line. Then Shaw exhaled slowly. If she's threatening exposure for leverage, that's extortion. If she's coordinating with others, it escalates. She is, I said, and she wants to meet. An hour later, I sent Rachel a message from a burner phone. You win. Let's discuss terms. I'll pay you to stay away and keep James's past private. The response came almost instantly. $500,000. Cash. And I want to see Sophie one last time to say goodbye. My jaw tightened. No, Sophie, I typed. $250,000 and you disappear. She countered. $400,000. Tomorrow. 3 p.m., Warehouse District. Come alone. I showed James. He didn't hesitate. It's a trap. Of course it is, I said. That's why we're ready. Marcus arrived that afternoon. He listened without interrupting, eyes sharp, already mapping possibilities. She's not rational, he said. She won't take the money and walk. I know, I replied. She wants destruction. We coordinated quietly. Shaw was informed, but kept at a distance. This needed to be airtight. Sunday afternoon, Marcus took position on a rooftop overlooking the abandoned warehouse. Camera ready. Clear line of sight. Police staged nearby, close enough to respond, far enough not to spook her. I entered the building alone, carrying a duffel bag filled with cut paper and just enough real bills on top to sell the illusion. Rachel stepped out of the shadows smiling until she wasn't alone. Patricia Lockwood appeared beside her, and behind them, 3 men I didn't recognize. So much for alone, I said calmly. Rachel laughed. I never said they were alone. Before anything could escalate, she spoke again, voice sharp, triumphant. You should know something. Even with the money, I'm sending everything tomorrow. Emails, photos, Northwestern, LA, all of it. There it was. The truth. This wasn't negotiation, it was theater. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I expected that, I said. Rachel's smile faltered. You see, I continued, your power only exists if we're afraid, and we're not anymore. Her face twisted with rage. Get her! The next seconds blurred. Movement, impact, shouts. Training kicked in. The hired men were amateurs. Within moments, they were down. Rachel pulled a weapon, hands shaking. A red laser dot appeared on her chest. Put it down, I said evenly. You're surrounded. She hesitated. The bravado cracked. Patricia backed away, panic replacing greed. When the weapon hit the floor and sirens filled the air, I felt it. The shift. The moment control left Rachel's hands for good. As officers moved in, Rachel looked at me with something like grief. I just wanted to matter, she whispered. You could have, I said quietly, but not like this. As she was led away, I understood something powerful. The turning point wasn't violence, it wasn't threats, it wasn't even the truth coming out. It was the moment we stopped being afraid of it. The aftermath didn't explode. It collapsed. Like a controlled demolition, precise, inevitable, and irreversible. Rachel was arrested on the spot. Attempted armed robbery, stalking, harassment, terroristic threatening. The 3 men she hired talked within hours, trading loyalty for leniency. Patricia Lockwood was caught the same night trying to board a bus north, eyes wide with disbelief that her plan had unraveled so completely. Detective Shaw called me at dawn. They have everything, he said. Audio, video. The weapon was loaded. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. Sophie was still asleep upstairs. James stood behind me, one hand on the chair, grounding us both. Rachel's lawyer pushed for psychiatric evaluation, claiming she wasn't fit for trial. Shaw didn't buy it, and neither did the prosecution. Rachel had planned too carefully, too patiently. This wasn't a break from reality. It was a choice. The deal came quickly. Rachel pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for a longer sentence with mandatory psychiatric treatment, 8 to 12 years. Permanent loss of custody of her daughter, Maya. When I heard that last part, my chest tightened, not with relief, but with grief. A child was paying the price for an adult's obsession. Social services called the next day. Maya had no stable family options. Foster care placements were limited. Temporary housing. Therapy lists. A system that tried but was always overwhelmed. That night, James and I sat in silence after Sophie went to bed. "She's my niece," he said finally. "She's 9. "And she's alone," I replied. The room felt heavy with the unspoken truth. Taking Maya in would mean scrutiny, evaluations, home studies, psychological assessments. It would mean bringing Rachel's shadow into our home, into Sophie's life, permanently. It would also mean doing the one thing Rachel never managed to do, choosing responsibility over resentment. "If we do this," I said carefully, "we do it together. No more secrets, no more omissions, complete transparency." James nodded. "I owe you that. And Sophie." We began the process. It was exhaustive. Interviews, background checks, home inspections, therapy consultations. My military record helped. James's clean criminal history mattered. Our marriage, strained but honest, was scrutinized closely. The first time we met Maya, she sat stiffly in a plastic chair at social services, hands folded too neatly in her lap. Her eyes flicked between us, guarded. "Are you going to send me away too?" she asked quietly. James knelt in front of her. "No." I followed, meeting her eyes. "If you come live with us, it's permanent." She hesitated. "My mom said you hated her." I swallowed. "Your mom was sick. She believed things that weren't true, but none of this is your fault." Sophie, who had been coloring in the corner, looked up. "Do you like unicorns?" Maya blinked. "Yeah." "Cool," Sophie said. "I have 2. It wasn't magic. But it was a start. The transition took months. Maya carried trauma like a second skin. Attachment issues, sudden anger, long silences. Therapy helped. So did routine. So did Sophie, who shared her room without complaint, who seemed to understand instinctively that stability could be borrowed until it felt real. By Thanksgiving, Maya had settled into our home. She called us aunt and uncle, not ready for more, but trusting enough to stay. She and Sophie fought like sisters and defended each other like it too. Rachel wrote from prison. Long letters. Apologies tangled with blame. We read them together. Responded briefly. Sent photos of the girls. Offered therapy resources if she wanted them. Boundaries stayed firm. Then came Patricia's trial. She refused a plea deal. Took it to court. James testified first. Then me. And finally, James stood and told his story publicly. Northwestern, the professor, the settlement, Los Angeles, the shame, the rebuilding. He didn't frame it as confession. He framed it as survival. The coverage surprised everyone. Sympathetic, thoughtful. Conversations shifted from scandal to accountability, from judgment to context. The truth, once feared, lost its power to harm. When James called me afterward, his voice sounded lighter than it had in years. "I feel free," he said. "I'm proud of you," I replied, and meant it. Rachel lost her leverage. Patricia lost her audience. The people who had tried to control us with secrets were left with nothing but consequences. And in the quiet that followed, something unexpected happened. Our family didn't shrink. It grew. 6 years later, I stood in our backyard as the late afternoon sun dipped low, painting everything in gold. Sophie, 13 now, taller, sharper, endlessly curious, sat behind the wheel of an old car in the empty lot beyond our fence, hands gripping it with exaggerated seriousness. Maya, 15, sat beside her, laughing nervously, trying to sound brave while giving advice she wasn't qualified to give. "Ease off the brake," Maya said. "I am easing," Sophie argued. "You're attacking it." I smiled despite myself. James stepped beside me, handing over a glass of lemonade. The quiet between us felt earned, not fragile, not forced, real. Rachel had been paroled the year before after serving 8 years. Mandatory psychiatric treatment, supervised housing, a grocery clerk job in another state. Maya chose to have monthly supervised video calls, careful, structured, emotionally contained. Rachel never asked for more than Maya was willing to give. That restraint mattered. I had sent Rachel one letter after her release. Short, honest. I won't pretend to forgive what you did to my family, but I acknowledge the work you're doing. Maya is safe, loved, and thriving. We'll support whatever healthy relationship she chooses. Don't waste this second chance." She wrote back with a single sentence. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter." Watching the girls now, laughing, bickering, protecting each other, I understood something I hadn't back then. Victory doesn't always look like justice served in courtrooms or villains led away in handcuffs. Sometimes it looks like two teenagers arguing over a steering wheel. James leaned closer. "What are you thinking?" "How close we came to losing everything," I said. "And how we didn't." He nodded. "Because we stopped hiding." That was the lesson Rachel never learned, and the one that saved us. Secrets rot. Truth heals. James's past, once weaponized against him, became a bridge to others who had survived and rebuilt. My need for control softened into trust. Our marriage, tested in the worst way, emerged stronger, not because we were perfect, but because we chose honesty when it was hardest. Sophie once asked me if she could write to Rachel to thank her for bringing Maya into our lives. I didn't know how to answer at first. Then I realized she was right. Pain doesn't excuse harm, but sometimes even harm can't stop love from growing where it's needed. As the sun disappeared and the car lurched forward, too fast, then stopped, I laughed and called out, "Brake! Definitely brake!" They did. And in that moment, I understood what winning really meant. Not domination, not revenge. Just this, a family built on truth, standing intact where everything tried to tear it apart.